First of all, you should know I just got tested myself and there's negative. So
Where did you get tested?
I had that take-home test.
Where did you get a take-home test?
I had it for a couple weeks now. Before the shortage. It was my last take-home one that I had, so I'm good for now. Anyway, thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss an incredibly important issue that is affecting New Yorkers by the day more and more. We all know how serious the Omicron variant of COVID is and how quickly it is spreading. I think in our experience, it's moving faster and more people have contracted COVID than I can remember even at the beginning of the pandemic. Fortunately, we have a number of people vaccinated here in New York, so the effects don't seem as severe as the beginning of 2020. Nonetheless, it is spreading and it is incredibly dangerous. And the one thing we have to combat it, other than the vaccinations, is testing, frequent testing. And yet somehow the city has seen fit, leading up to this moment, to cut back the number of testing sites. The one thing we learned about COVID is you have to stay ahead of the curve. You have to predict where it's going and be prepared for it. And unfortunately, we took a step backward 2 weeks ago, and we're not prepared for the incredible demand for tests that's occurring now. Anywhere you go, if you can even find an appointment to get tested, if you're lucky enough to do that, you're going to be waiting in line for a significant amount of time to get your results. We have the holidays coming up, Christmas is this weekend. People want to see their loved ones, they want to get tested and do the right thing. But if those tests are not available to them, it's going to be a serious problem. We have all been working here, local representatives, myself, Assembly Member Zohran Mamdani, and Council Member Tiffany Cabán, to get Western Queens back to where it was and even better. We've talked to the city, we've talked to the private nonprofit providers. We're making some progress. This location where we're standing right now was a mobile testing site. We believe it will be again, but the problem is that the city is taking too long to turn these things around. They're telling us maybe in a week or two this event will be up. The Variety Boys and Girls Club, we're hoping, will be up shortly after Christmas. But every day is a lost opportunity. And we need to move faster, and we need to get these things going. And we're here today to say that we're doing everything we possibly can, but the city and the infrastructure of this government needs to step up and do its part. It hasn't done it so far. So let me bring up my partners in this effort. Working very closely with me on this has been a member of the Assembly, Zohran Mamdani.
Hello, everyone. To put it very plainly, we're in the midst of a crisis. Yesterday, New York City hit 15,000 positive cases for COVID, which is a record throughout this pandemic. And in that time, we are still asking people to wait for hours on a line to get tested. I spent 4.5 hours on Sunday in line to get tested for COVID here in Astoria. And I was lucky enough to get a test because there were so many of my neighbors who stood in that very line for 3 to 4 hours and were then turned away because of staffing and capacity issues. We have tents and mobile vans across the city that only have 2 people in them at a time, and we're asking them to work from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. We have so many people who are turning to their loved ones and saying it's not even worth getting tested because of how long it's going to take and the question of whether they will even receive their results. I have heard from so many constituents who have waited for days, and those days have even turned into a week, and they have yet to hear whether or not they have this virus. So we need the city to understand that the need right now is urgent, it is great, and the response must be immediate. We must set up rapid PCR testing across this city, and here in Astoria, we need a brick and mortar site, one that is permanently open to our neighbors across this district to ensure that they can stay healthy. What we are doing right now is a recipe for disaster. It is a recipe for losing trust in the ability for government to deliver for working class people, and it is a recipe for continuing this pandemic for even longer than it has gone on. It is unacceptable, it is ridiculous. I'm proud to be here alongside my colleagues in fighting to change that, but we need the city to prioritize this. This should be the #1 thing on the docket for this current mayor and for the next incoming mayor. We have to get our neighbors tested, and we have to ensure there's a clear and rapid way for people to clarify whether or not they are healthy in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just reiterate something I mentioned earlier. This weekend coming up, Christmas weekend, is a very big one for family gatherings. Okay, people are trying to get tested to make sure their families will be safe, and they can't get it. One of 2 things will happen. Either they'll be denied a holiday with their family, moments with their loved ones, or even worse, they'll go ahead anyway and potentially put people at risk, spread the virus further, and get people sick. So we need to do this. We need to do this as soon as humanly possible. We need to increase the capacity of this city. With that, let me bring up our great city council person, Tiffany Cabán.
I mean, I obviously want to echo the things that my colleagues have already said, but I think it's worth doubling down on the observation that the people in power, right, have done everything they can to shift responsibility away from the government and corporations and onto everyday people, right? As though a global pandemic is not a matter of public health, but rather a matter of individual initiative. And it's not fair, it's not right, and quite frankly, it's a cop-out, right, that's costing us our home. And so nevertheless, as our assembly member had mentioned, our neighbors are showing up. Y'all are showing up. When I see my constituents waiting for upwards of 4 to 5 hours to maybe, not definitely, maybe get their hands on a PCR test, and then to wait an additional 4, 5, 6 days to get a result back, it's clear that everyday people are stepping up to meet the challenges. Everyday people are treating Omicron as the serious issue that it is. Everyday people are taking responsible steps to protect their coworkers and their loved ones. Everyday people are doing the right thing. But our mayor is not. We are seeing that the mayor has failed to protect our people. And this isn't new. It's not like it's snuck up on us. We have been living through this pandemic for 2 years now. And because of the brilliance and hard work of South African doctors, we knew about Omicron a month ago. And despite that, right, instead of preparing for what we knew was coming, we shut down testing sites, 20 testing sites, just in this area alone. So we've got to do better. We have to make sure also that we're protecting our city workers, right, walking the walk. The fact that we are still forcing people to go into offices, to sit in cubicles in poorly ventilated buildings, to just sit on Zoom meetings anyway is unconscionable. We need to provide people with remote access to work from home. And I just want to thank my colleagues that are here and joining in this fight to make sure that we're expanding capacity and keeping our neighbors safe. Senator Gianaris, Assembly Member Zohran Mamdani. And I want to thank all of our teams, because I know that our teams have been out on the phones, knocking on doors, doing whatever they can relentlessly to make sure that we expand that capacity. So we're going to continue that fight until we get it right. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, Mike. President Biden. President Biden's expected to announce later today a federal testing site in New York City. Don't know the exact specifics. Might be the Javits Center. We're waiting on the venue, but do you think that people from Western Queens would hop on a train and go to a site in another borough, or does that sort of massive response miss the mark, or do we need both?
We need both. Everything helps. So if they want to open up a big site, but it's not the most convenient place for a lot of people to get to. I think the one thing we know is that people are committed to getting to their families and their loved ones. Some of them are elderly this weekend. They'll make the trip, but we shouldn't have to do that. We shouldn't make people travel an hour just to get tested when we had a van right behind you up until a couple of weeks ago. And for some unknown reason, the city pulled back on testing sites. As I mentioned earlier, the way to beat COVID is to stay ahead of it. And as a council member mentioned, we knew Omicron existed. Why on earth were we pulling testing sites when we could predict that this was going to happen, the demand would pick back up? It's unconscionable, and it shouldn't take over a week or two to get them back in place. Get them out here immediately so people can get tested, because people are ready. Yeah.
Just in a city where you can now get groceries within 15 minutes, it should be just as easy to get a test. And we are asking New Yorkers to hop on a train, to go to the Javits Center potentially, when really it should be on their way to work. It should be around the corner from their apartment. It should be convenient to get a test, because we have to encourage those that are already willing to stand 3-4 hours in a line, as well as those who just don't see it worth their time. We have to make it clear to people that you can go in, you can get your test, and then you can get a guarantee that you'll get your results within 24 hours. We used to do this in the city. We're sometimes able to. It needs to be constant, it needs to be consistent.
So on the heels of the mayor announcing his plan, and he announced a 6-month plan last week to get here and safe. Have you reached out to the mayor about this issue that you're seeing?
I think we all have. And we've been begging them to move faster to get sites in place. That's how we know that there'll be a site back here again, but they're telling us not for a couple weeks. Or at the Variety Boys and Girls Club, where again they're telling us at best right after Christmas. So it's just not happening fast enough. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the answers we're getting, quite frankly, aren't acceptable, right? We, over 2, maybe close to 3 weeks ago, had put out a letter saying don't close the LaGuardia testing site, and so then to come back to us and tell us, actually we're not really closing, we send a mobile unit over there. That's not an acceptable substitution. We need to make sure that these are sites that have enough capacity to meet the current demand.
Anybody else? All right. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.